Oh, yeah.
In the past, we've always had our recommendations and goals for the year. I think the 5 that we spoke of last night, where we went through and did the evaluation, I think those are 5 great goals. I hope everybody got to read the email today. If not, I can go through and I'll read them real quick.
And everybody's got a copy of it.
Yes, it's right.
Yes.
It's here.
The long-term financial stability and infrastructure readiness
okay.
would be the first one. Community health, safety, and well-being for the second. Housing, workforce stability for the third. Organization, capacity and leadership continuity. And the last one will be public trust, transparency, and institution resilience. But I think those are great goals for the council, the directors, and the city manager to work through the year. And with that, I would like to turn it over to John.
All right, thank you. Yesterday when we got started, I shared with you guys what was intended to be the guiding agenda to move through it. Today, based on the successes I feel like that we had from last night and how much we were able to get achieved, Timothy and I went back to the drawing board and decided to make some modifications to what we were planning to present tonight. And so in front of you guys, you'll see another slide printout that shows this revised agenda, our intended, what we want to accomplish for this evening. So before we get into the data, though, I want to reset how we're thinking about the Urban Renewal Agency today. We're going to talk for a little bit on economic development before we officially transition to urban renewal. But this is not a conversation about approving projects. It's a conversation about role, timing, and discipline. The Urban Renewal Agency, as you know, is a finite tool. The question before us is how we intentionally use it to extract the most long-term value before it sunsets, rather than letting it fade out without strategy. Unless you have any questions or comments in regards to that, I'll turn it over to Timothy for the next. Kick it up.
Can we, before we transition to URA, can we just revisit a couple of things related to last night's discussion?
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate your email, John. I would like to, I would advocate for planning some additional work sessions other than just talking about, fuel tax funding. And I certainly invite the opinions of, fellow council members here, but I would, personally, I'd love to see a work session around substance abuse and homelessness. And I think that would tie in very well with what Chief Bell, suggested last night. It sounds like we could have, a budget impact if we decided to, look at a drug enforcement officer or something like that. I think that would be a great time to talk in detail about what that would entail, what we would expect to happen, maybe how that's worked in other communities. I know we've had a little bits of discussion around that, but I think that would be a worthy work session. I would suggest that because that will have potentially an impact on the budget, that we should schedule that prior to budget hearings. I think that would be wise. I would also love to see a work session scheduled around succession planning within the city. I think that would be a worthy topic. I think maybe separately, we could also consider looking at housing and workforce stability. I think that would be a great opportunity to present to the council, for staff to present to the council what it looks like, what our current economic demographics are, the businesses that we serve, the industries that we have in town, what that balance looks like, what we want it to look like or need it to look like in order to, bring about some of the ideas that we've discussed. And then I think maybe that's enough. I don't know that we need one around the public trust topic, but I certainly would have others there. Anyway, I don't know, but just my thoughts. Again, I think a couple of those are time sensitive. Maybe the one on the fuel and the one on abuse and substance abuse and homelessness. But
Absolutely. And I believe we've got on the 9th of February now, or 9th?
Yes.
Am I saying the right date?
Yeah, that's correct.
We've switched out what we were planning,
Yep.
and we're going to do the gas one on the 9th.
Okay.
Great. Would that be okay, though, if we schedule some sessions around those topics, just to, kind of be a little more strategic about,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
some in-depth discussion, what are we going to do, what can we do, and then, bring some alignment around those. Thanks.
Absolutely.
And that was kind of what your idea when you wrote this, is that these are kind of the work sessions that you want to focus on,
Yes.
right? Correct, yeah, I thought so, yeah. Excellent, thank you.
So is the 9th could be enough time, though, to gather information
For gas
for a
tanks?
gas tax?
We had some conversation with
Yeah.
Kyle today.
There you are,
and
Kyle, you're up here.
I'm here, I came to the table today.
He
Yay.
and I have been talking about this for the last few weeks, anticipating that it would probably go, and he's been preparing for it all.
Perfect.
Is there anything particular you want to make sure?
I was just making sure you had enough time to bring the information to the table.
Yep. I think
That way we
get-
have good information versus rush.
Yeah, I think the one
Was.
that we're interested in most, that there really is no way to get our arms around, is how much is going to be internal versus out of La Grande for fuel purchases.
Right.
That's just gonna be, put your thumb up and gas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I apologize if your intent was to schedule work sessions there. I just, reading this, we specifically mentioned only one of those as a work session, and so I just wanted to bring the others in, make sure we were gonna.
I understood that that was your priority, so that's the only reason why I mentioned it in there.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. Thank you. All right, with that being said, before we actually fully transition into the renewal, Timothy would like to close out with some stuff having to do with economic development. Well, go ahead, Timothy.
Yeah, and I don't have slides for you on this first piece, and I think that's fine. We just all ate dinner, and who wants to look at a bunch of slides on the first? So we'll give you a couple minute break. As we kind of started tonight's discussion, I wanted to take a minute and kind of step back and look at some of the things that have happened over the last 4 years that I've been here. I think partially because I think sometimes we have short memories. And there's actually been a lot of economic development success in the last 4 years. And I think it's important for us to recognize that while we have need that we need to address, and we want to be thinking strategically about how we move forward, it's worth taking a minute and looking at kind of what's been happening, where we're trending, and some of the successes that are laying, I think, good groundwork for future success. So, I mean, when I started, so 4 years ago, and I'm just using that date because that's what I clearly, have been able to visually see. 4 years ago, the Grande Plaza was in pretty rough shape. Rite Aid was kind of clearly on the way out. There was a vacancy where TJ Maxx is now. Since that time, TJ Maxx has come in. Rite Aid's gone out, been replaced, redeveloped with both Harbor Freight and an expansion of Carpet One. We've also had Ace Hardware expand. And we're really now down to 2 meaningful vacancies in that plaza. I think that's also a success story in that growth has been a mix of sort of recruitment of corporate brand name retail, but also local entrepreneurs expanding and investing in the community. So you have that balance. And I think particularly when we think about sort of economic churn, and we have a lot of economic uncertainty still out there right now, when we see that balance where we can attract notably third-tier sort of national retail chains who are looking at our market, but also there's enough investor confidence that local entrepreneurs are willing to be part of that investment. That's a really important indicator for us to be thinking about in terms of sort of economic stability. We've also had the Hampton Inn opened up last year. We've had the Highland Avenue Chevron expansion, which was a pretty significant investment. The new Napa Auto building, which we'll talk later, created some new opportunities downtown. The Ford dealership did a pretty substantial expansion renovation. So again, we are seeing local entrepreneurs supporting some of that, and then also the ability, driven by a local entrepreneur group, attract a brand name hotel, the first new hotel in LaGrande in I think 25 plus years. And so again, pretty significant investment, and all of that has happened outside of the urban renewal area. So, so I think, you know, when we've talked about urban renewal, we sometimes feel like urban renewal has been where all the effort has been. There's been effort and success stories beyond that as well. Downtown continues to revitalize. In the last 4 years, I think I came on just as Evermind was purchasing the old Elks building. That's been a significant renovation, adding both a small-scale manufacturing production space, but also a retail space, and obviously some significant investment in the exterior renovation that has tied in with renovations that we've seen along that block with the old, I'm going to get the wrong colors, is the blue Rhino? Or the, I think it's the blue.
Orange.
Orange Rhino. All right. But where, so where the bagel shop is now, there's some Airbnb properties back there. We're seeing that investment go around the block. 10 Depot's reopen. We're renovating the upper floor of the 10 Depot building now. So we are seeing some pretty concentrated clusters. We're seeing a redevelopment of the former UNI building with Nate Conklin's project. That will include a mixed-use retail environment, focusing a lot of experiential restaurant, entertainment, also a commercial kitchen piece, as well as his commercial offices. So again, getting a density of use in that building that really utilizes the full space. And then the food truck pod adding to the vitality of downtown. Across the street, when Napa expanded, the question was, what do we do with this 10,000 square foot former auto parts store? And now that's a fully functioning winery. They did first crush in there last year. They did production all winter long. Tasting room is in, and they're continuing to build out and finishing the renovation of the actual building. So super interesting, exciting kinds of transformative reuse of some of these spaces that I think is really important. We've also continued to work on other opportunities along Jefferson Street, particularly around the opportunity for small-scale manufacturing expansion. That is a need that probably wasn't identified when we did the plan in 2010. It really was a need that was identified post-COVID, when we saw a lot of folks starting their small sort of product-making business in their basement during COVID. We've had some of those folks already kind of begin to expand and grow. Flying M is actually on Jefferson now, but it's just purchased a building. They will be expanding, renovating a building that'll be retail in the front, production in the back. We've had a couple of local makers already kind of catch wind of that transition, inquiring about space for their business, which is still kind of in the coming out of the basement phase, looking for really small space. So that space Jefferson, where Flying M is currently, could kind of become sort of a rotating incubator space. We've got several other properties that have sold, that we've missed opportunity on, but we have 3 other properties that are still actively in transition of ownership that could present some really different opportunities for some larger rescale redevelopment. So while we've had this discussion a little bit at a work session with the agency, and right now they're not ready, the agency's not ready to prioritize that as an agency-funded project. The reality is there is economic activity that is still consistent with the economic development plan, with the urban renewal plan, and we'll continue to work with those individual projects as it makes sense from an economic development stance. We've also seen, I think, significant progress in the business park. When I came, there was not a lot of activity there. I think Steve West was there. That was probably the most recent new arrival when I came. We are now down to literally 2 Wayne Care lots that the city owns. So we have sold all of our lots. Those are all in some step of redevelopment. And of course, the big project out there, the Amazon project, is now up, operating, and creating interest in the remaining properties that are out there, most of which, other than our 2 1-acre lots, are now owned by Rod Larvick, who purchased all of the former UC, Union County Economic Development Corporation, UCEDC, purchased all of those lots just about the same time that I was coming up. So that was about 4 years ago that transition in ownership occurred. So I feel like we are making some progress there. And I think when we look at a community our size, look at the size and the scope of and diversity of some of that economic activity. That doesn't include some of the bigger projects with the new field house, the new hospital expansion, sort of bigger projects that from an economic development standpoint, they were heavily involved with the city with planning and building, but with economic development office, more marginally so. I think those are meaningful success stories, and it's a meaningful trend for us to be looking at as we kind of move forward to what's next. Looking ahead at 2026, in the last 2 years we have worked with the planning department very closely, updated an economic opportunity analysis Goal 9 study. That study demonstrated that we need an additional 63 additional acres of commercial property and up to 121 acres of industrial property to meet our anticipated 20-year growth expectations. Goal 14, which is really the second part of that, and we presented these to council when we first did these reports, so this was last summer. I think you at the Goal 14 numbers, and that's really where we had to go through and identify where we would add potentially those extra acres of commercial and industrial property. And the challenge, and we shared with you at that point, is we've got demand within the area that DLCDC would allow us to expand the urban growth boundary to capture and rezone that property. We have no willing sellers right now. So that is a constraint that we need to be thinking about as we're looking at our economic development plans moving forward. How do we change hearts and minds about willing to sell, or how do we find alternative solutions to bring additional property into play? So while urban renewal continues to be, I think, a successful tool, and when we get to the slide presentation piece, we're going to talk a little bit about some real metrics that show some of that impact. But I think it continues to be a successful tool for development within the urban renewal district, council has expressed concern that we need some tools that are available beyond the confines of the urban renewal boundary. So I think that's part of the discussion that we want to have as we move forward. And I think there's also just some general uncertainty from staff's perspective as to council's desire and direction as we prepare for and start to strategize kind of where and how urban renewal sunsets. I feel like there's some feelings that maybe we just want to get it done, get to maximum indebtedness, get that moved back into general fund and be done with it. I think there's others who recognize some value to the slow, steady approach that we've had that has produced, I think, some meaningful long-term impact. And then I think there's folks who just aren't sure. So as a staff, I am going to be looking to the agency for some clarity and direction on how you want to move forward this year. So, and we'll talk about what that might look like as we move forward. In terms of, if you'll flip your page over for those of you who are following, I'm making a couple of recommendations for council consideration as we move forward. First, as we move through tonight's presentation, I am making a recommendation that we budget for and that we invest this year in a new updated economic development plan in conjunction with an urban renewal evaluation and sunset strategy plan. You know, our urban renewal plan we did in 1999. I think there are parts of it that are still relevant. I think there's things we've done really good at addressing. I know that there are agency opinions that there's things we need to go back, revisit, that maybe we haven't done. So I think the idea of bringing in a consultant, budgeting to actually do a strategic plan, we look at the original plan, what's been accomplished, what's been successful, what are the priorities moving forward on urban renewal, and put that into a timeline. What I don't want to do is arbitrarily say we want the urban renewal to sunset in 2031. Or, you know, if we look at that as an agency and you say we want this to be a 7-year plan or a 5-year plan, I think that's the agency's discretion. I don't necessarily think we should rush to sunset. We should take the time and say strategically, what do we want to accomplish with what's left, and what's our timeline and strategy to do that. And I think we are best suited by having a consultant come in and invest in having that plan facilitated with the agency.
Timothy, I have
yes.
a question, and I know that we're growing downtown, and I think it's wonderful, and things are happening. In your plan, because I know you're looking down the years, are you thinking about any expanding parking? And the reason why I ask this is I went downtown for trying to do Christmas shopping 4 separate times, and I could not find a place to park. And I know that is deterring some people because they can't find places to park. And also, I think the businesses would do better if we had more parking. Because I know that ODOT did that center line, because I remember when we had the angle parking. But is there anything in the future that you're thinking about for expanding parking facilities?
I do not have parking on my to-do list.
Okay.
I think as part of any future plan, the ongoing revitalization of downtown, parking is certainly part of that discussion. I don't have the answer for you. I can tell you there is a wealth of data that suggests that while parking is the hotspot and the easy thing to sort of lay blame on, it is rarely the end-all be-all solution, and that there's usually a more complex and integrated solution.
Well, I agree with you, but I think that's part of the issue though too. Because I think, I know for a fact that I would go downtown more often than going to Walmart if I could find a place.
So,
I mean, that's just me.
not going to
though.
argue with you. It's not on my radar.
Okay.
Are you asking to put it on the radar, though?
We gotta do something, but I don't know what,
You
you know?
you need to have a little more of a solution. I mean,
Well, that's what we
We've
would do.
worked on it
works-
for years.
Yeah, I mean, we need to
And I think it
figure out
really
something.
does have to be part of an integrated revitalization strategy. I don't think there's a standalone solution.
I know
So-
that a lot of businesses are talking, they've mentioned it to me, they'd like to go back to the ankle parking in,
Yeah,
like we used to have, and get rid of the turn lines.
because we don't, yeah, I thought we were fine before turning, everybody just waited.
This is
There's
a
choice
rabbit
in
hole that.
I
we're
know,
not
but
gonna
it's
get
ODOT
tonight.
though, isn't it?
So,
Something that we could think about, and I'll throw this out there for the council slash agency to be able to say whether or not they want to look into it, but I'd have to back away from it pretty quick if we decided to look at it, and I can explain why if you want me to. But when we had that lady come for the work session, she talked to us about purchasing properties.
Yeah.
And she'd mentioned, used an example at another location where an In-N-Out burger ended up coming in and they had wished that they had had control of it to be able to decide what they were going to do. Well, I think we have property on our, inside of our agency right now that would be expensive, but could very well get after what she's talking about, which would be an opportunity for us to control what actually goes into that location. And it might even actually help address some of what you're talking about in regards to parking, because that particular parcel of land has significant parking with it. So that's something that the agency would have to think about and direct us to look into. If you do that, then I would say I have a conflict of interest in regards to it. But Timothy could take lead on it and then just report back to you what comes from it if you decided.
Yeah.
So tonight, I'm trying to stay away from individual projects, because I think this council really wants to focus on preparing for the budget, and I think those are good, valid discussions that should be part of the planning process. So in addition to doing the urban renewal piece, I also believe that we're operating on a 15-year-old urban economic development plan, and we need to update that plan. That plan does not address the growing impact of housing and workforce development retention that are increasingly, were at one point probably tangential to economic development, have now become really integral. I think that plan was based on where we were as a community, as an economy 15 years ago. That's changed significantly. I think there are new opportunities. We've talked about some with Jefferson. We've talked about just, success we've already seen at the business park. What's next? Are there areas of the community that we want to put additional focus on and think of, is there probably things we can do for that stretch of Highland Avenue between the railroad tracks and the plaza? I mean, so there are a myriad of new issues that weren't addressed in the old plan that I think would be relevant for us to at least have discussions about and build strategy around. So the important thing is that in looking at our budget, and this is actually kind of the purpose of tonight's meeting, is to figure out some priorities in the budget. I believe looking at our budget that we can fund both of those plans with no to negligible impact on the general fund. The urban renewal plan, we can fund that out of urban renewal without any significant impact to existing programming. The larger piece, based on outreach that I've done, talking to consultants, other communities that have gone through the process, we're looking at about $120,000. 100 to 120,000 is kind of the range I'm anticipating, because we're rural and we will want our consultant team to travel here on several occasions. We'll have some travel costs. So I'm anticipating the range will be closer to 120. We can trim strategically the economic development budget, targeting those reductions that allow us to continue to be responsive and proactive in limited capacity while doing the plan. Or at the agency council's direction, we could look at taking some of the funds that have been sitting unused in the agency-initiated development fund in the urban renewal plan, and take a portion of those to fund activities and under-levy that portion, which would bring that revenue as new revenue into the general fund. And so if we were to take that $500 agency-initiated fund, even cut that to $250, use that $250 to fund the existing agency, initiate the existing urban renewal projects, and then under levy that $250, that would, based on our current tax rate ratio, would give us the 120 and some change into the general fund to cover that cost without impacting any other general fund expenses. So we're looking at opportunities to do that. I think as we move forward, we'd look to the agency and to our council to make a recommendation as to which direction they'd like to pursue that. I throw it out there just because I think it's important to note that the funding is there if we're strategic to fund both of these planning efforts without impacting the general fund.
I like that idea.
So, I think the other thing that I think is important is, as we're moving forward and starting to think about this next step, doing some planning, how do we kind of move forward? We need to quickly come to some consensus on this year's call for projects, particularly. We're in a really strange predicament where we are talking about 2027's budget, but we are talking about call for projects application process that typically would open in 5 weeks. So as we've had some discussion about whether that should be a grant program, a loan program for call for projects, I am concerned that changing at this point in the game, I will tell you that we already have multiple property owners who are engaging with us, anticipating applying for what at this point they believe is still a grant. If we change that to a loan, we don't have much time to change our marketing, update our policies, figure out how the loan pieces can be managed, and get through a grant cycle that funds those projects literally in the first week of the new fiscal year. So my request would be that the council, the agency, consider continuing status quo on the call for projects for this application process, continue the dialogue, and make a decision this spring about where you want that future to be as part of this planning process. That way we can fund projects that are kind of already initiating this year's application process. We have next summer to address any policy issues, reposition our marketing if there's consensus that it changes. And by the time the application process starts again, we have the information ready for folks. We've prepared them that it's a different incentive moving forward. So that would be my request. Again, you can't ask you to make a decision today at the work session. But I think this is a really timely issue that I would hope we can reach consensus in the next coming weeks as we try to move forward.
Do we need to make a decision at the next meeting?
We should probably have this on the agenda in
Yeah.
February and definitely in March.
We do. We have it on the agenda for us to come back to you with a proposed decision for urban renewal and for the way forward with the budget.
In February?
Yes.
That's good.
Okay. So yeah, so even if we can just get to consensus, that lets us kind of move forward.
I think it's a good idea.
The other quick thing that's coming up that I'm going to ask the agency to start thinking about as part of this whole planning process is where we're currently at with the business park. When we started, there were two public entities who shared the ownership, where the plan was sell off to private investment, develop, and exit out of the business park. We are down to 2 lots now. We have in our budget, the urban renewal budget, we've combined it now, a combined incentive that is either a call for projects for properties in the business park or traded sector. So either one can apply for that because it's a combined. I think the agency should be prepared to have a discussion and issue some policy direction. If we keep a portion of that fund sort of dedicated and available to properties only in the business park, how are we establishing a taxpayer-funded incentive that truly only benefits one ownership once we're once we're no longer property owner? Because all the remaining property at that point is owned by Larvik. So, and I don't think we necessarily have to eliminate the incentive, but I think perhaps eliminating the singular call out for the business park application. Anybody out there who was doing a project that qualified as traded sector would still be eligible. We're just not carving out a piece that could questionably be perceived as benefiting one property owner, if that makes sense. So I kind of leave that out there. Those are the kinds of discussions that I think in this planning process we'll want to look at those a little bit. I know I've taken a lot of time to kind of set the stage, make that transition from economic development to urban renewal. Mr. Mayor, if we're brief and we can get through the next couple of slides in 10 minutes, will that work before you
No,
take a break?
keep going.
Okay. I don't think I have a clicker, so there we go. I have the fearless meter over there to help out. So after our last work session, the city manager and I did reach out. We did bring in a consultant to really look at the question of how effective have our expenditures and incentives for urban renewal been. And so one of the things that we specifically looked at is the properties, projects where we have spent grant dollars, where we have awarded call for projects. And you can see all of the locations in yellow are where we have invested grant dollars. And if you go to the next slide, please. And we looked at the growth tax receipts within the district. And so if you look, this bottom line is the comparing the growth rates of tax receipts for the city of LaGrande. So that's the thin gray line, starts at the bottom and kind of winds up in the middle. So if we look at all of Union County, that's that middle line that is right there. And then if we look at properties that we invested in call for project grants starting in 2018, you see that we got a little bit of a spike, a plateau, and a significant spike. And then we continued to trend in a significantly positive direction, outpacing both the city of LeGrand and the county in terms of tax revenue growth. So if you want to go to the next slide. We also, for your comparison, asked them to compare us to, and this slide is actually in your handout if it's marginally easier to read from your handouts. So we asked them to really look at
Nope, nope, we don't have it.
it's not in there?
Nope.
I thought it got sent out, okay. My apologies, so you're stuck up here. I will make sure that the slides get sent out.
Thank you.
I thought that they had been forwarded out, my apologies. So we looked at this one and we asked them to really compare us to other comparable sized urban renewal areas where we could look at rates of growth in other areas. And if you look at that, we're coming in pretty solid. When you look at Pendleton, it's about 22% growth within the district. Warrenton, 17. LeGrand's coming in at 43. We've got a few folks like Tillamook and Philomath. I think they may be similar in size, but they have larger regional population bases, economies to draw from. So I think when we look at our effectiveness compared to other urban renewal areas, I think we're doing pretty well. And so we'll go to the next slide. I think this is another breakdown that I want to go back. And this one really shows sort of dollar invested to actual, this one shows on the right-hand column, this is the real market value growth in those projects that we funded. So the left-hand column is how much we funded in grants that particular year. So you can see we're under 350 because that's been our cap. But when we fund 350 for a couple of years in a row, and then we suddenly, 2021, start to see a significant spike. And I mentioned this 2 years ago and again last year, and we're going to look at it a little more in an upcoming slide. Part of this is that when we started the grant program, we marketed it as a 50% matching grant, and really that's what we got. We got projects that would find enough work to get up to 75,000, so that we could match that 75. What we're seeing now is that we're frequently coming in at a 20 to 25% match on projects. So we're getting a much bigger bang for our dollar, and we're seeing significant growth in real market increased value. And John, if you go to the next slide. So when we looked at the aggregate of all of our call for projects grants, we basically saw a 6-to-1 increase or return in investment. For every dollar we spent, we saw $6 in increased market value in those properties. So next slide, please. This is just really quick. I want to show you, again, going back to my earlier comment, sometimes we forget sort of all the stuff we've done. We looked specifically at 3 kind of random sample projects that illustrate some of the variety of projects. So this is the TAPTAT and building in the Iowa building. This was a $75,000 grant. The project real market value was $90,000. The current real market value is $826,000. So the improvement increase was $483,000 for our $75,000 investment. And that's a building that now has what we would argue an anchor retail restaurant, attraction on the ground floor, and apartments on the upper floor. and is definitely an improved tax base, but also surrounding vitality of the building. If we look at the next project, not one of my favorites, but one of the projects that we did that's actually outside of downtown, because we did invest in a number of projects that are within the urban renewal district, but outside of downtown. This one was purely new construction. And again, we contributed $75,000, new veterinary clinic, got some family wage jobs, and a real market improvements, $608,000. And then our final slide on this one is of course the local, which we all remember as sort of a vacant, abandoned gas station that's now, we would argue, sort of a cornerstone entry into coming into downtown. This one was even a smaller project. $64,000 was our investment, real market value increase, 423. So all of these projects, when we looked at these, the return on investment from an assessed increase, these projects all return the value of their loan within 6 to 9 years back into urban renewal and then perpetually into the general fund collections. So, and then I think I have one last slide. Nope, that was my last slide. Okay, so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or Mr. Mayor, if you want to take this time to do a short break.
Anybody have questions for us before we go on the break? Nope. How about we take let's just do a 5-minute break real quick, come back, 8 till.
And my apologies for not having.
Yeah. So it's not on the docket.
Somebody move this forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Ready whenever you are, Timothy.
I'll actually take it from here.
I might want to know what's.
Sorry,
What the
they're talking. I was in the way.
We've kind of, no, you're good. We've had kind of a lot of conversation around this topic, I think, throughout the course of the evening. The bottom line is this slide is intended to talk a little bit about, if nothing changes, what we see that as looking like going forward. Some of it Timothy outlined in his conversation with you in regards to the plans that we want to use. So and this slide, if you distill it down, it's meant to say that our desire and intent is from an economic development point and an urban renewal perspective, to use this next year to make sure that we're well informed and knowledgeable on what we're going to do for deliberate strategic steps in both of those realms going forward. And that's really the so what of this slide right here. With that in mind also, though, I wanted to bring up that we're in the window where we need to bring up the validation and continuation of the Urban Renewal Agency under levy intent. If everyone's, I'm not expecting a decision for that right now, but we would be bringing that to the next meeting as well. The intent for us to be able to send that out, because I believe it's the middle of February that we have to start doing those notifications. Our recommendation would be that that's how we proceed forward.
Excuse me, say that again, Tom, not to have any?
For the most part, barring the nuances, what I think in the grand scheme would be budget dust, in regards to coming up with what we would have to have for funds to do the planning that we need to do. Aside from that, we'd be doing business for the most part what would look like the same way. I say status quo, but it's not, because the thing that's going on in the backdrop is that planning effort and the authoring of that strategic plan. And we'd be using this next fiscal year to make sure that we're ready to start running in the fiscal year after. But you guys have an actionable plan that we can move out on.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry, so you're suggesting that you would advocate for keeping the under levy the same, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
The same as roughly the same as what you did last year.
Okay.
Which is basically, we under levy enough, so we have enough money in the URA to cover our programs.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Unless you have any questions on that, that's the so what here. With that being said, Heather.
So with kind of in mind of where we are with URA, and I know this has come up several times, is where we're at with our bonds, and we have 2 bonds and a loan. We have the Adams Avenue Streetscape bond, which originally was 1.55 million. Our current balance as of December is $855,000. Its interest rate is about 2 to 3.5, and our payoff date is June of 2034. Our other bond is the Big H project. It was just a little over $1 million. The balance as of December was $430,000. Its interest rate is 1 to 3.5%, and its payoff is December of 2032. And then our loan is for the Business Tech Park. It was just a little over 1.1 million. Our balance now is 461,269 as of December at a 4% interest rate, so December of 2033. So our payoffs are December 2032, December 2033, and June of 2034.
Wow.
So, and I don't know if you guys remember when Elaine Howard came, really, the URA doesn't end until we've got these completely paid off.
Right.
And there is no penalty for early payoff.
Oh, that's good.
Strategically, it might be smart for us to draw it out to them. But that's some of the conversation we'll come back to you.
So I guess that's kind of the, yep, go ahead.
Okay.
Was I supposed to talk about this one?
But really, if we can take a step back, Heather, I mean, once we hit that maximum indebtedness, all of the funds that come in are now going to pay the debt.
Exactly.
And so it's not going to stay on that schedule, right?
No, we
Yeah.
could probably pay it off early, to be
Right. I mean, there'd be no reason not to, because you've got money coming in, what can you do with the money except to pay the debt? Because once you
Well-
hit that maximum indebtedness, right, you're locked, you can't.
Yes, but this is where I'd like to have more conversation about it on the future, only because one of the things we want to talk about is right now, the way we're funding Main Street is through these dollars as well. So if we under levy enough to cover our costs but not fully pay everything off, well, then we can draw it out longer and keep funding things to Main Street, potentially. That's why I'm saying we have to have more conversation on it.
And I guess, and maybe I misunderstand this, I mean, because once you hit the maximum indebtedness, you can no longer take on any more debt, correct?
correct.
Can you continue to fund projects with the money coming in until the debt is paid off? Like, how does that work?
That's why I'm
Or is it
saying we
like,
have to have-
no, all of that money gets funneled to debt, and then it's,
So
I don't know what the rules are.
Definitely correct me if what I'm saying is wrong. That's why I'm saying we have to be strategic about timing our maximum indebtedness, because once we get there, you're right, that's going to cause some of those problems for us.
Okay.
So I'm saying we slow our roll to keep us from getting to that point, so we can make sure we can have a good strategic and solid plan for Main Street before we take away the primary, arguably primary funding that they're used to getting to help. But we're also, that's part of our work effort going forward over this next year too, is developing that plan with Main Street to make sure that we're aligned with what we're perceiving as our likely timeline. But we're also trying not to push them out the door any faster than they're able to get up and running. Because they're just starting to get healthy now. So it's a program that I see that we need to do the best we can to help be the best it can be. Am I speaking out of turn?
No.
Okay.
So a good idea would have a work session where we can go more in depth in this matter. Is
I
that
would,
where you're
at some point in time, yes, but it's not gonna be in the very near future. There's a whole bunch more analysis that's gotta go on.
Yeah.
So, but what I can say is when we get into the glide path for the next budget year, that's gonna be probably the time where we're gonna come back and say, all right, this is the deliberate on everything. In order, not just this, but on all the things we've been talking about.
I mean, it might be good to clarify just so that we know, how you kind of construct that plan. What does happen once you hit that maximum indebtedness mark?
Yeah.
What can that, because you still have revenue coming in.
Yeah.
What can it be used for? Is it exclusively to pay down that remaining debt, or can you continue to use those funds as long as you're not incurring new debt, I guess?
Roger.
That's the question I have.
Absolutely, I'll make sure we get that clarity.
Yeah, and I would anticipate that would be part of that planning process, having a consultant in who can help us say, what does it look like
Yeah.
at that sunset phase? Here's when you can stop spending money, here's when, yeah. So
Yeah,
I
I think
think,
it's a great idea to bring a consultant in towards the end, because I haven't been through closing out a URA on the finance side, and, yeah.
Thanks, Dawson.
Yeah, okay. So decision point number 2, which lanes must be sequenced during the sunset window? This is meant for discussion.
I'm not sure I know.
Yeah,
I understand
I
the
don't know,
question.
yeah.
Can you rephrase that now?
As we're looking towards, when I'm asking for your priority in the way that we want to look at sunsetting, this is intended to say, what do you think and or feel would be the logical order in which you would want to see it happen in? And these are the elements of consideration. Like, do you want what we're looking at right now, our primary focus for the remaining years to be revenue producing redevelopment? Or do you want us to be infrastructure unlocking investments? Or do you want execution capacity or transitional support declining?
Can you define what those
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Those aren't clear to me what I'm making.
Okay, so then revenue producing redevelopment would be us investing over onto Jefferson over here and investing into it in a way that's meant to not only increase the value of the properties that are there, but also investing in it in a way that's meant to have businesses that are bringing more revenue to us.
Are you
Not just simply the properties in themselves.
Not just the property taxes,
Right.
but, I mean, how would a business bring money to the city beyond property taxes?
Other than, depending on what we're bringing here, could very well be bringing something new here that isn't here already. So yes, the property tax is, but it's also the people that come with it.
Okay, but that's not always revenue producing.
Well, it can connect to it.
Are you talking about doing Jefferson before we finish Adams? Is that in this component?
It can be. Ultimately, all
I
of
don't
this is
think
intended to
anybody's
do is for.
proposing any order at this point.
Well, no, I'm
Maybe
just
examples.
trying to understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, these are
Ultimately, like, we can even take off what's written on the slide. What it's meant to do is gain from you your priority of how you want us to influence the method in which we sunset.
I think what they're asking for, though, is explain what you think of infrastructure unlocking, what would that mean?
Yeah, each
Right.
of those, yeah.
Each one of these, that's what
Yeah.
they're
Right.
asking.
Yeah.
Right, so it's not anything different than what we'd already be doing by investing into our infrastructure as far as unlocking. Continuing to do what we've been doing there in order to gain more revenue there. So more than anything, this is about keep doing the same thing that we're doing, but which area do you want us to focus on most heavily?
So on the infrastructure unlocking investment, does that mean something like our grant project where
Yes.
we finance or help finance?
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
That's what they
And
want.
unlocking private investment?
Yes.
Okay.
John, I'd say, I mean, Timothy's presentation today is certainly broadened my perspective on the value that you know, that this has brought to the city. But I think one of my priorities would be, how do we create something that is long-term, that is in perpetuity? This has a sunset.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about when it does sunset, what do? It takes years to open up a new, urban renewal district and get it to the point where it generates this kind of revenue. I mean, we've been fortunate, but part of this is just the length of time that it's taken. So I don't want to see a decade or a 2-year, 20-year gap where we have nothing to invest in there, because that's gone. I mean, the city's going to get a portion of that money back into the general fund, but nowhere near what we're sharing with the county and all these other taxing districts. And so I want to know, I want to look at ideas. That's to me the value of a loan type of program or something like that, something that brings in revenue that can then be captured and set aside for use in perpetuity. And so to me, that's a priority, is how do we take this beautiful thing that we have and start to craft a plan, from now until it sunsets, to getting a more steady stream of revenue that can then be used for economic development without maybe the shackles of the renewal district. That's what I want to see. How do we bring this money back in and earmark it in the general fund for future economic development opportunities? So that's my biggest fear, is this thing goes away and now we're waiting 10 or 20 years to get something like it back and have those
You can't
opportunities.
earmark it in the general fund.
You can't earmark it.
Well,
but-
whoever's on the council can, but
Quote
we
unquote
can't.
earmark. No, we
10
can't,
years
but you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
if we say, hey, we create a tradition of using, X number of dollars because, hey, guess what? Those dollars came back to us through loans. And that's what, the consultant had suggested, is
Yeah.
that once that money comes back, it's ours.
To do it.
And we can use it however we want without, again, the constraints that are inherent in an urban renewal district. And so, that's what I would like to see explored. And I'm not saying, I agree with you, Timothy, there's certain advantages to grants, and I think the point you brought up is a very valid one. We don't want to change this midstream on people that have been counting on it. But I don't want to delay this much longer, because I think it's a golden opportunity And I'm open to hearing other suggestions, but that's to me really a prime one that we can look at utilizing to turn this into a long-term investment. One's going to last well beyond any of our time on the council.
Right.
So, okay.
I think that is exactly the kind of answer that I was hoping to get from this discussion. Other ideas of areas where we would want to talk further in the future with some analysis of what we would like to see coming out as we're nearing the end. Any other thoughts? Timothy, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
You know, I mean, I think on the revenue producing development, I mean, I think that's two things. There's the revenue, property tax revenue producing. We see the value of that. I think David's right. You know, trying to find, is there a strategy to create a more stable, perpetual funding sort of solution? So is it an operational revenue stream? I think infrastructure is one that's worth looking at. Again, as part of that bigger, broader discussion. I mean, if we look at the business park, we spent $2.5 million out there. That probably would be double that if we tried it today. But it's a slow burn, long game return. I mean, we all know how long it sat out there before we started seeing development. But are there other opportunities where that infrastructure could be timed in a manner where there's development poised and ready to go, where infrastructure is the incentive that pushes them over the fence? So I think that's a worthwhile discussion. I think for me, as your staff, what I would be best served by is, as part of the discussion, to simply go back to look at what were the original goals, what were the original objectives, what did we get done, what's still missing that's still important. And that will help guide some of that prioritization. My guess is it's probably going to fall into one of these three. But there may be stuff in there that the impact is more fuzzy and difficult to describe. It's more about vitality and how does downtown look and feel, or how does an economically stable community feel. Some of those elements in there may still be important, but we may have a harder time sort of defining what it is that makes it that important. I think that discussion among the agency members and direction as we move forward is really valuable to me in terms of how we look at trying to put stuff on the ground.
I think the infrastructure is probably the key because our buildings are so old downtown and very expensive to renovate, and that's where we're going to get most of our bang for our buck is in the infrastructure.
And the plan, we definitely talk about infrastructure in terms of in the ground, streets, roads,
right,
stuff, but we also talk specifically pretty extensively about, adaptively reusing and restoring and, putting new economic activity into some of these old buildings. So if that is still a really valid, measurable priority, that direction from the agency helps me figure out what we want to, put on the ground next.
I guess knowing an inventory of what we have, what needs renovation, what's vacant, could help
Well,
direct that.
I do know that the original plan had the streetscape finished, at least to Greenwood. I know that because I can remember being in those meetings. So I know that was important to the people. They were promised it. And then it just went to Elm and it hasn't gone further. Just the street, just to make it look cohesive downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was going to throw into, I think something we need to talk about here too is blight, any type of blight that's in the district. I feel personally like the more we're making things look nice, and all the things that we can legally use urban renewal dollars for to do it, at first contact, it might feel like we're not getting an immediate return on that investment. But I would argue that anything we're doing that makes the city more attractive to people is only going to help us in some of these other areas that we're going to want to, you know, if we're going to try and attract more people to live in our city, we're going to need people to like the way the city looks. Otherwise, when they're looking it up online or they come here and visit, if something that they happen to see is unattractive to them, then it's just yet another deterrent to keep them from making that decision.
Well, real quick, Timothy, back to when you were talking about putting money into the structures and things like that, like in downtown, the vacant buildings, is that what you're referring to? In the buildings down there, helping, you know, assisting the prospective new business owner coming in? Is that what you're referring to, like the vacant buildings that are downtown?
So I think there's vacant buildings all over.
But I'm specifically,
the
you know,
district. There are vacant buildings that we could reuse. There's developable property. And I think the urban renewal plan
yeah.
talks specifically about renovating historic buildings and filling, vacant buildings.
It's just, I just see it so overwhelming because there's so much expense fixing up those old buildings. I understand.
And I think that's one of the reasons the agency, made that a priority in the plan.
That's right.
Because that was that incentive to make that investment more doable. And I think we've seen the impact of that.
Yeah.
So, from my perspective, I think that's been a really worthwhile and high impact use of the funds. I don't say that to diminish the other projects. I think the infrastructure piece, at the business park, great investment. I guess that would probably cost us double today,
Right.
but again, it's a longer term return on what that investment did.
It certainly is. It took a long time to get this money back.
So yeah. So I think these are all good conversations that the agency should be having as part of that planning process, because that's the direction that will help me as your staff, put those next 5-6 years
Right, together.
work plan on the ground.
I just think some of what's up on the slide, these lanes are really nebulous, so having more clarity on what you're talking about, I think we're getting a little bit
I would agree with you.
clarity, yeah.
I think the agency has all the ability they want to rename those and use definitions that make sense to you
Yeah,
And to the public.
and to the public.
yes, definitely.
Timothy, I think one of the things that would help me a little bit is having some historical perspective on what we've seen from the investments you've been in. You presented some of that data here, but really I'm interested to know, okay, we helped renovate a building that created apartments or something. What's the vacancy rate of those apartments? Have they been continuous? There's questions that I would love to have as a follow-up that I think inform us as to what are the most valuable investments that we can make. Not that they're not valuable at all, but if we're having to pick and choose, and that's what this game is all about, they're opportunity costs. To your point, Marianne, we'd love to finish the streetscape, but that's going to completely wipe out the remaining indebtedness. We're done at that point. It would completely wipe it out, probably cost a little more beyond that. And so, I think I want more information to look at it. I think I feel like in my time on council, it's been kind of, something cropped up here, yeah, we'll do that, we'll do that, we'll do that. Without a lot of strategy to it, without a lot of looking at it and saying, what really is this? And I feel like, especially with the call for project, this money comes up and we almost feel obligated to spend it all, even if some of the projects maybe aren't ones that we would pick if there was a little broader pool. And so I wish we had a little, again, some of that historical perspective to look at how has this turned out categorically in the type of investments that we've made.
Okay. Well, we can certainly pull that up as we go through the process.
Yeah.
Give you as much, if you can coordinate with, myself or city manager, kind of, what are the key things you'd like, sort of deeper information on, we can certainly pull those out. Some of that is going to be easier for a consultant, so it may be that we can get you the stuff that's at our fingertips and within our capacity, but then as we dive into that planning process, those are kind of the first things that we present our consultant and say, as we're evaluating these, we'd like to evaluate based on these criteria. Can you help us determine, the best way to measure those metrics? So, yeah, I'm happy to help lead the agency through that process and provide what I can easily access in-house.
All right, so as we're actually nearing the completion here, what I'd wanted to be able to capture was deliberately the things that we've talked about here, and what I'm understanding is guidance of where we're going to go forward for here and how we do that. And so in some of our previous conversation, we talked about some of the things we wanted to dig deeper into in regards to what the primary leverage point would be of how we're going to use urban renewal as we're moving towards the sunset. So to me, that's what I would see as being our primary role moving forward. The priority lanes, I'm not sure that I've gleaned in this conversation what our priority lanes are, other than to say that we want to look into that reinvestment and return in funds beyond the life of urban renewal.
I think we need more information, like historically.
Yeah, agreed. And I've made a note in regards to us coming back as a work session to deal with those topics specifically.
And I think some of this too is whether the opportunities are there or not. I mean, the city, you don't have a lot of power to create these as much as, this is often that public-private partnership where we're waiting for the right opportunity on the private side to come, where now we can pair publicly. And so sometimes I think you're just waiting for something to crop up, but you want to be poised and ready to act. So, I mean, I don't know that the priority often becomes what's available.
As far as guardrails, I see this as being our time, money, and performance. When we've defined that we're, at least especially over this next year, well, it's going to be every year, obviously, but going forward, we've defined on our own that we're going to do something similar. It's going to look similar from the outside to what was done in the past. And so we just need to stay on that target, make sure that we do what we're supposed to do responsibly with the money within that.
Are we looking at decreasing that amount of money for CASA projects?
If there's a, Timothy, you want to speak to that?
So for tonight's presentation, there's no recommendation to increase those. We're just wanting to kind of be pretty status quo, start this planning process, start moving in the direction that the agency wants to direct us. As part of that, you can have all kinds of discussions.
I wasn't saying increasing, I was saying decreasing it,
So,
the total amount that we give.
yeah, well, and you're not obligated to spend.
I know,
everything.
yeah.
There's been years when we didn't have 350,000 in applications. But even if we had more than that in applications or in proposals, the agency can always say, that project doesn't meet our standards.
Which we have done.
And so that can certainly happen as well. So yes, I mean, that is entirely an agency.
Well, I was wondering if that was what your recommendation was to decrease the amount to.
No,
Okay.
not at this time.
All right, and then the direction to staff, I'm understanding that we will come back with that memo at the next meeting that will affirm the way forward that we've discussed here tonight, and then also that under levy statement for us to be able to start disseminating there. Unless anybody has anything they want to add to that, or to that portion of the discussion, I'll continue. This next slide is the conclusion. That kind of, I'm looking for you to affirm what I just said before, which is our recommendation is that we develop those options, that we come back with something that's going to look similar with nominal, if any, increase in regards to what it's going to cost for us to pay to develop those plans. We have those work sessions that we've discussed, and then we come back to you with that for you to sign on the 4th of February. If that's not what you want to do, then I would ask you for some guidance of what you would prefer to do otherwise. I don't have another recommendation.
I agree with that.
I think that one is fine.
All right, with that being said, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for everybody coming and sitting through. Tonight was definitely better than last night. Good conversation. Good conversation. I appreciate everybody. Short while.
Oh, okay.
And with that, I will adjourn. Thank you.
So that's the big
Time.
I could have gotten you out here in 10 minutes, and I've been here. So everybody.